Okay, we're going to go into chapter 2, macronutrients and micronutrients. Let's get started here. Um, Objectives of this chapter are to distinguish amongst the monosaccharides, disaccharides, polysaccharides, discuss carbohydrates' role as energy source, protein sparer, metabolic primer, central nervous system fuel. Define and give examples of triacylglycerol, saturated fatty acids, polyunsaturated fatty acids, monounsaturated fatty acids, and trans fatty acids. We're going to list the major characteristics of high-low density lipoprotein cholesterol and discuss the role of each in coronary heart disease. List the 4 important functions of fat in the body. Define essential, non-essential amino acids and give food sources for each. List one function of each fat list one function for each fat and water-soluble vitamins, and explain the potential risks of consuming these micronutrients in excess. Outline 3 broad roles of minerals in the body. Define osteoporosis, exercise-induced anemia, and sodium-induced hypertension. Describe how regularly physical activity affects bone mass and a body's iron stores. Outline factors related to the female athlete triad. List functions of water in the body. Define heat cramps, heat exhaustion, heat stroke. Explain factors that affect gastric emptying and fluid replacement. List 5 predisposing factors to hyponatremia with prolonged exercise. Okay, so first of all, we're going to go into the macronutrients, which they're nutrients that provide energy necessary to maintain bodily functions during rest and diverse physical activity. So they provide energy. When they're broken down, they release it through bonds being broken, and then they through different types of physical activity, which are the primary energy sources that are used. Carbohydrates, we have they're contained in all living cells, mostly found in plant sources. And then there's examples here of these, which are monosaccharides, disaccharides, polysaccharides. In the book, which, by the way, the book is a great resource. I've used this book and another book actually in conjunction to this course. This book here, the McArdle Catch and Catch, is a great book, and then the other book would be a 4th edition of the Essentials of Strength Training Conditioning by Gregory Half and Travis Triplett, which is another great book. Another resource that has a lot of validity, reliability. So in regards to these monosaccharides, we have basically it's mono is 1. Okay, so what we have here is you have one in regards to glucose. Let me back up here. Basically, monosaccharides are the basic unit of carbohydrates. Okay. And in regards to this, you have things such as glucose. It's also called dextrose or blood sugar. And with glucose, the chemical compound formula for it is the C6H12O6, which means you have 6 carbon atoms, 12 hydrogen, and 6 oxygen. And this glucose basically forms when energy from sunlight interacts with water, carbon dioxide, and chlorophyll. Okay. After absorption from the small intestine, when you consume this, glucose functions in 4 ways. It's used for the cell by energy, stores glycogen in muscle and liver, converts fat for energy storage, provides carbon skeletons to synthesize non-essential amino acids. Fructose is fruit sugar. It's the sweetest of the monosaccharides. It occurs in honey, tree, and vine fruits, flowers, berries. It acts like glucose, serves as energy source, and moves directly from the digestive tract into the blood. It primarily converts to fat, but also glucose in the liver. Galactose, which is milk sugar, basically. So galactose, but basically is forms lactose in the mammary glands of lactating animals. So you have those there. So moving right along, disaccharides are di is obviously two, so it's two molecules, two monosaccharides. Two monosaccharides form a disaccharide or double sugar. And monosaccharides, disaccharides collectively make up simple sugars. Okay, so in regards to the simple sugars, how are they commercially packaged? If you look at what's in the name on page 36, it'll talk about what percentage of certain types of sugars are simple sugars. What's the percentage content of glucose and fructose? Okay. So you have like corn syrup, which is 100% glucose. You have fructose, obviously, is 100%. But you have like apple juice, for instance, is 66% fructose and 33% glucose. Polysaccharides. So let me back up here. One of the things too, in regards to the disaccharides, is that you have sucrose, which is glucose and fructose. You have lactose, which is glucose and galactose. So remember we talked about galactose and we said, oh, that's a monosaccharide. Yes, it is. It's a monosaccharide. So when you take galactose and glucose, it becomes lactose, which is milk sugar. Maltose is another one that basically is a disaccharide, which is glucose and glucose. So two glucose molecules, and that occurs in beer, cereals, and germinating seeds. When we go over to polysaccharides, we have starch and fiber, which are in plants. So when people say, what is fiber? Well, fiber is a carbohydrate. And fiber is actually a necessity. We need to have fiber in our diet. In regards to this, so you have polysaccharides. These are basically hundreds of individual sugar molecules, poly, joined together. So large amounts. Where do you find these? Okay, you can find these in bread, cereal, pasta, pastries, peas, beans, potatoes. Okay, and the term complex carbohydrate refers to dietary starch. Okay, you have fiber, which is classified as a non-starch or structural polysaccharide, includes cellulose, which is the most abundant organic molecule on Earth. Fibrous material basically resists hydrolysis or basically being broken down. So functional fiber, if you're talking about that, basically refers to non-digestible carbs with beneficial human physiological effects. So if you eat adequate fiber intake, it ameliorates constipation, diverticulitis. My God, and it helps for fuel the colonic cells, reduces blood glucose and lipid levels. And what it does is the cells in the outside in your colon have to be regenerated when fiber scrapes that when the food's excreted. Uh, it provides a source of nutrient rich, low density, low energy dense foods that contribute to satiety, fullness as well. Okay, Americans basically consume about 12 to 15 grams of fiber daily, far short of the recommendation. So we don't eat enough fiber. So what's carbohydrates' role in the body? They serve three primary functions related to energy, metabolism, and exercise. Carbohydrates, an energy source, protein sparer, metabolic primer. Um, uh, Another thing that basically happens is that fats burn in the carbohydrate flame. So some of the intermediates that occur in the carbohydrate metabolism cause fat to be broken down more readily. Okay, and from a biochemistry standpoint, that's pretty much the in-depth nature of all that I need to go into for this class, but it's important to know. In regards to carbohydrates' role in the body, from an energy source, uh, carbohydrates are utilized uh, from the brain uses carbohydrates. And also uh, anaerobic activity. The primary source is a carbohydrate. Okay, so you have athletes that are on sports teams are eating or basically high percentage of their diet, um, at least 60% of daily calories or 400 to 600 grams, really should come from fiber-rich fruits, grains, vegetables, because uh, even 70%, 60 to 70% really for athletes, because of the fact that it gives instantaneous energy. Carbohydrates fuel activity about 2 times faster than proteins or fats. Another thing, protein spare, adequate carbohydrate intake preserves tissue protein. So basically, carbs spare protein degradation because the glycogen reserves, which glycogen is stored in muscle and in the liver, is used before the protein. Okay, so it when you have excess carbohydrates, um, it basically causes the metabolism to maintain plasma glucose levels, which is beneficial to sparing protein. Metabolic primer, you have, like I said, the byproducts of carbohydrate breakdown serve as the help in burning fat. Okay, so insufficient carbohydrates inhibit fat breakdown as readily. Okay, and then fuel for the central nervous system. We talked about a little bit how I just said the brain uses glucose. In low carb diets, the brain adapts metabolically after 8 days and starts breaking down fats, which is ketosis. Okay, that's really what that is. And so it breaks down, uses fat in the form of ketones rather than glucose. And gluconeogenesis is basically creating glycogen, creating glucose from non-carbohydrate sources for use of energy. In important carbohydrate conversions, you have glycogenesis, which is glycogen synthesis from glucose. You have gluconeogenesis, which is glucose synthesis largely from structural components of non-carbohydrate nutrients. So proteins become glucose basically when the chemical structures are changed. And then glycogenolysis basically is glucogen formation from glycogen, which is what the body basically stores in the muscle and liver. We have glycemic index, serves as a relative uh, qualitative indicator of carbohydrates' ability to raise blood sugar levels. So glycemic index and then glycemic load represents the amount of available carbs in a single serving. If we talk about the glycemic index, we have certain foods. They're high glycemic, moderate, and low. High glycemic foods such as carrots, honey, cornflakes, wholemeal bread, white rice. These give a spike to the insulin because levels basically that are in our pancreas, because what'll happen is there'll be a sugar spike in the blood. Insulin's then released to then have that glucose be able to be used by the cells quickly, so we don't have high blood glucose. But when you eat low glycemic type of carbohydrates, give a slow and sustained response of energy. So you have apples and kidney beans and peanuts, okay, that are still carbohydrates, but they're low in the glycemic index. Okay, moving right along, we have lipids, which are oils, fats, waxes. You have simple lipids, compound lipids, derived lipids. A lipid, from the Greek lipos, meaning fat, has the same structural elements as carbohydrates, but differs in its atomic linkages. So you have the lipids ratio of hydrogen to oxygen considerably exceeds that for carbohydrates. So we have C57H110O6. Okay, so hydrogen to oxygen considerably exceeds. So you have a carbohydrate with C6H12O6 with the glucose. So formula, common lipid, when you have the ratios considerably different. Also, carbon and oxygen don't have an equal ratio. So it's kind of an interesting thing. So carbohydrates, the ratio is 2-to-1. Okay, hydrogen to oxygen, and it's much different for this. So okay, basically we talk about simple lipids. You have simple lipids or neutral fats consist of triacylglycerols. They can constitute the major storage from fat. More than 90% of body fat exists as a triacylglycerol. So, and this is predominantly in adipose cells. Compound lipids are basically ones that have more. They're neutral fats combined with phosphorus. Okay, phospholipids or glucose, which are glucolipids. Another group of compound fats comprises lipoproteins. And lipoproteins serve as important functions because they constitute the main form of lipid transport in the blood. Before we get into the compound lipids, though, I'd like to talk a little bit about, I'll come back to that. Derived lipids. We have cholesterol, okay, is the widely known derived lipid. It exists only in animal tissue. Cholesterol does not contain fatty acids, yet it shares some of the physical and chemical characteristics of lipids, and from a dietary viewpoint is considered a lipid. Triacylglycerols constitute, that's why I'm going back to the simple lipids, constitute the major storage form of fat. Saturated fatty acids are found in beef, lamb, pork, chicken. So basically animal products plus vegetable shortening, hydrogenated margarine. Saturated fatty acids contain single bonds between the carbons. So they hold as many hydrogen atoms as possible. Saturated fats basically are resistant to oxidation by heat. So if you see saturated fats, meat fats, they are solid at room temperature. Okay, that's why you get the marbled effect on the steak, the white parts. And then unsaturated fatty acids, you have monosaturated canola oil, olive oil, peanut oil, oil and almonds, pecans, avocados, uh, and then polyunsaturated, which you see in safflower, sunflower, soybean, and corn oils. Um, some of your unsaturated, and in unsaturated fatty acids, you'll see a double bonded carbon in the structure. Okay, so that's one way to recognize it from a chemical composition standpoint. In the chains of fats, you have short chain fatty acids, medium chain fatty acids, long chain fatty acids, and very long chain fatty acids. Okay, and when these things are broken down, they release energy. That's pretty much what things to think about. Now, so unsaturated fatty acids, if you see the oils are actually liquid at room temperature. Okay. Compound lipids, phospholipids, glucolipids, lipoproteins, chylomicrons, high density HDLs, low density LDLs, very low density VLDLs. What does all that mean? Well, the liver and small intestine produce high density lipoproteins. These have the greatest percentage of protein, lowest total lipid and cholesterol content. The very low density contain the greatest percentage of lipids. Okay. In regards to bad cholesterol, LDLs have the greatest affinity for cells located on the arterial wall. So basically, and what affects the LDLs? Three factors influence serum LDL concentration, serum or blood LDL concentration, which is regular physical activity, visceral fat accumulation, and diet composition. Good cholesterols or high density lipoproteins, they protect us from heart disease. HDLs act as a scavenger and facilitate the reverse transport of cholesterol, moving it from the arterial wall and transporting it to the liver, where it joins bowel formation to be excreted from the intestines. So the HDLs you want to see and LDLs you don't. Okay. Derived lipids, we talk about, so we'll move on. We have cholesterol, substances formed from simple and compound lipids. Cholesterol exists only in animal tissue. Exogenous come from food intake, endogenous synthesized within the body, so they're self-created. Okay, one of the interesting things is that that we talk about cholesterol limitations and things like that, but research has shown that blood cholesterol is important. However, scientific evidence actually indicates that only about 20% of your blood cholesterol level comes from dietary intake, meaning that the liver produces the rest of your body's cholesterol. Thing too with cholesterol is important for us to have in our bodies. Okay. Even if you attempt to eat a cholesterol-free diet, endogenous cholesterol, or created by the body, there still varies between 0.5 and 2 grams daily. Okay, so body forms more cholesterol with high saturated fatty acid diet, because saturated fat basically facilitates liver cholesterol synthesis. One of the things that cholesterol participates in, and with the bodily processes, with the necessary functions of cholesterol, are they build plasma membranes, precursor to synthesizing vitamin D, synthesizes adrenal gland hormones, serves as a bowel component, which breaks down lipids during digestion, helps tissues, organs, and body structures during fetal development. The thing with cholesterol too is cholesterol in your skin, the UVB rays basically hit the cholesterol, which makes the synthesis of vitamin D occur. So that's why being in the sun is necessary, because it actually helps in generating vitamin D synthesis. Trans fatty acids, this is the hydrogenation of unsaturated corn, soybean, or sunflower oil. This is when basically the hydrogen atoms are moves from the cis position to the trans position on the double bond side of the double bond that separates two carbons. Basically, you find these in vegetable shortenings, margarines, crackers, candies, salad dressing, baked good, and also you find them in fried foods. Okay, partially hydrogenated vegetable oil. Oh, you put it in the fryer before it goes in there. It's white, then it turns clear. Well, it's bad for you. Um, it increases the LDL, low density lipoprotein content, similar by a similar amount as a high saturated fatty diet, like eating a ton of meat that's fatty, bacon, things. So it also decreases the high density lipoprotein cholesterol, which is good cholesterol. So that's why trans fats are actually been placed at a high risk of individuals high risk of heart disease. In December of 2006, New York City became the nation's first city to enforce a ban on trans fats. Full statewide ban on trans fats became a law January 1st, 2010. Okay, in California. Let's see here. Lipids role in the body. Energy reserve 9 kilocalories per gram for lipids. By the way, carbohydrates are 4 kilocalories per gram. Lipids, so there's more kilocalories per gram for lipids than there are in carbohydrates, which are 4. Okay. Protection of vital organs, thermal insulation, transport medium for fat-soluble vitamins, and hunger suppressor, so they keep you from being hungry. Protein forms from amino acid building block linkages. You have essential amino acids must be ingested preformed in foods. 8 non-essential amino acids manufactured in the body. 12. There's 12 of those. So there's 20 amino acids. 8 are essential. 12 are non-essential. And it doesn't mean they're not needed. It just means they're manufactured in the body. Complete proteins come from foods with all essential amino acids in their correct ratio. Incomplete proteins lack 1 or more essential amino acids. Recommended protein intake is 0.83 grams per kilogram of body mass. So we can, if you, the reality is if you 2.2 pounds equal 1 kilogram. So you have a situation here where you do not need 1 gram of protein per pound. It's definitely less than that for the average individual. I'll talk about that in a short while here. Okay. So you look here and you say to yourself, all right, proteins. Okay, a lot of the proteins we get from meat, fish, poultry, and eggs. However, you can get proteins from plant sources too as well. Sources of proteins. Okay, so you have egg, milk, meat, fish, poultry, synthesis in body. This is basically just talking about how transamination is being able to get amino acids from non-amino acid compounds. So you're getting protein basically from carbohydrates and fats, and the deamination is that you're removing an amine group from amino acids. So you're converting a carbohydrate or lipid to a protein for usage. Amino acids that make up proteins basically are building blocks. The building blocks of proteins, like we were talking before, are essential or very helpful in a lot of ways for in the body. So the benefits basically they help with building different types of cells and things of that nature. Okay. Transamination, like we just talked about, and this is transamination was the changing, basically forming amino acids from non-amino acid compounds. A little bit more in regards to proteins and things of that nature is that proteins are essential in regards to certain activities that go on in the body. You have to have uh, proteins constitute between 12 and 15% of the body mass. Um, so it, when you're building red blood cells, muscle cells, and things like that, you need proteins um, to basically take on these roles. Okay, protein requirements are physically active people. I'd like to go back to proteins a little bit here, so I don't want to go too quickly because there's some stuff in the book that is essential. People have asked the question, how much protein do I need, and things of that nature. A lot of it has to do with what you're actually, who are you? Okay, so an athlete, okay, they can require more protein. The book recommends that athletes who train intensely on a daily basis consume between 1.2 and 1.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body mass, and not more than 2 grams per kilogram of body mass. So that's a little less than 1 gram per pound, obviously, because even for the athletes. So it's really about 0.9 gram per pound. So it's not necessary to have more protein than necessary, because what ends up happening is the kidneys have a hard time getting rid of the excess protein. Okay. However, protein is important in regards to muscle breakdown and the ability to build muscle back up. Mike, let's go back here. Micronutrients, we have vitamins and minerals. Vitamins, we have fat soluble A, D, E, and K. These dissolve and store in the body's fatty tissues, don't require daily intake. Water soluble vitamins are C and B complex, and they act as coenzymes. Vitamins, they don't supply energy, okay, but you need them to maintain optimal physiological function. Some deficiencies can lead to medical complications, and so that's why it's important to have vitamins in your diet. So what are some of these biological functions? We have blood clotting, we have potassium. Okay, we have in the skin vitamin A, C, B6. Okay, what the skin is benefited by those. Okay, the bones, vitamin C, D, A. Blood clotting, or blood formation, excuse me. You have B6, B12, C, folate. Neuromuscular function, we need A, B6, B12. So if we're deficient in some of these things, you may not be able to perform as well if you're in deficit. Minerals, and by the way, vitamins are on tables on page 56 and 57 in the book go through the list of vitamins and what happens if you have a deficiency and what happens if you have excess. For instance, vitamin D, if you have a deficiency, rickets, which is a bone deformity in children, can occur. Okay, and then vitamin C, if you don't have enough of that, scurvy is something that can take place. Okay, so these, and not having the B complexes either as well. You can have nerve change, you can have nervous or mental disorders, muscle twitching without vitamin B6. So those are things that you need to look at in the book. Minerals. In regards to these, you have 22 mostly metallic elements serve as constituents of enzymes. Enzymes speed up reactions. Hormones and vitamins. Trace minerals require about less than 100 milligrams daily. Major minerals required in amounts of greater than or equal to 100 milligrams daily. So, kinds, sources, and mineral functions. Provide structure in forming bones and teeth, help maintain normal heart rhythm, muscle contractility, neural conductivity, and acid-base balance. Help regulate cellular metabolism by becoming part of enzymes and hormones that modulate cellular activity. They can activate numerous reactions, release energy during carbohydrate, fat, and protein catabolism too. So minerals contribute to macronutrient catabolism, which is catabolism's breakdown, and anabolism, which is the buildup. Okay, so you have glucose basically breaks down into carbon dioxide and H2O. Fatty acids do the same, and then release energy in amino acids. So you have those things taking place when you're breaking down glucose, fatty acids, amino acids. Okay. They also create breakdown of these substances, create calcium, cobalt, copper, iron, magnesium, manganese, potassium, sulfur, and zinc. The buildup, or anabolism, which is on page, this is on 63, by the way, in the book, you end up, from glucose, you get glycogen, which is stored in the muscle and liver. Fatty acids that are stored as fats. Amino acids, okay, create proteins, building blocks, obviously, amino acids, building blocks, proteins. And then they're also creating calcium, chlorine, magnesium, manganese, and potassium. So that's what minerals do. Osteoporosis. Result in prolonged negative calcium balance. There's not enough calcium, so bones eventually lose calcium, mass, mineral content, calcium density. Mineral density progressively become porous and brittle. It affects 44 million Americans, or 55% of people 50 years or age or older, 80% being women. Adults 19 to 50 years need 1,000 milligrams of calcium daily. Regular exercise slows the rate of skeletal aging. Now, we talk about weight bearing here. In regards to weight bearing, what happens with bones is bones go through this process of remodeling, which collagen forms on the outside, which then turns into bone. And that comes through weight-bearing activity. Okay, so if you're not doing weight-bearing activity, then it's not going to slow the osteoporosis is not going to be slowed down. So not only it's calcium, but it's also activity. Female athlete triad. A lot of this happens sometimes for women who train intensely. Disordered eating behaviors, amenorrhea, which is loss of menstrual cycle, and then osteoporosis takes place. Okay. So you have to. These are some of the things that have to be looked at in regards to osteoporosis. Electrolytes. So these are things such as sodium, potassium, chlorine, dissolve in the body as electrically charged ion particles. Electrolytes modulate fluid movement within the body's various fluid compartments. Allow for constant, well-regulated exchange of nutrients, waste products between cells and external fluid environment. Basically, some of these things, such as these, establish proper electrical gradients across cell membranes, allow nerve impulse transmission, muscle stimulation and contraction, and proper gland functioning. Electrolytes also maintain plasma membrane permeability, tightly regulate the acid and acidic and basic qualities in the body and body fluids, and particularly in the blood. Okay, so they're really extremely important. Sodium, okay, you hear about this a lot in the news and things like that. CDC recommends that nearly 70% of adult Americans should follow a low-salt diet between 2,300 and 1,500 milligrams. The body only requires, by the way, 500 milligrams of sodium. So adult Americans typically get about 4,500 milligrams of sodium, or 8 to 12 grams, which is each day, which is way more than necessary. And there's sodium in a lot of foods we don't even know about. We don't realize. Groups that are special risk for sodium sensitivity, those are existing hypertension, those 40 or older without hypertension, or African Americans ages 20 to 39 without hypertension. Okay. Daily recommended intake, by the way, is about, it states it there, 2,300 to 1,500 milligram. Iron. Okay, iron increases oxygen carrying capacity of blood 65 times by being combined with hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is basically the iron protein compound that carries oxygen. Okay, so it also serves as a structural component of myoglobin, which is the red protein that carries and stores oxygen to muscles. So it's a necessity to have iron. If you don't have iron, you could become lethargic and things like that. If you, let's see if there's anything else. Let's go back. If you lose blood, basically, then you have iron deficiency. When you have iron deficiency anemia, basically you're losing, when you lose blood, you lose iron. So that's why some individuals need to have iron supplements and things like that. Iron therapy. Okay. Anything else here? Water. Moving along to water. And once again, I'm going over the things you need to know. However, you need to go back through and read the chapter too as well, because there's a lot more information in there. Body's water content. 40 to 70% of our body consists of water. Water constitutes 72% of muscle weight, approximately 20 to 50% of weight of body fat or adipose tissue. Body has intracellular and body contains two fluid components: intercellular, which is in the cell; extracellular, outside of the cell. So in regards to this, we have the 6 sources of the interstitial fluid, which is like the extracellular component. Includes lymph fluids, saliva, eye fluids, fluids secreted by glands and digestive tract, fluids that bathe spinal cord nerves, fluids excreted from skin and kidneys. We have to make sure we have enough water because it serves a lot of functions. Functions provide the body transport, reactive medium, diffusion of gases across most surfaces, transports nutrients, gases, and disposes of waste products, absorbs heat with only minimal changes in temperature, joint lubrication, and provides structure and forms to the body tissues. Water intake. Normal environment, sedentary adult requires about 2.5 liters of water daily, or 10 cups. For active person in warm environment, water requirement increases to about 5 to 10 liters daily, or 1.3 gallons to 2.6 gallons. Okay. Most individuals consume about 1.2 liters per day, which is 5 cups. Okay. 3 sources of water are liquids, foods, and metabolic processes. One of the things about hidden water in food is that there's water in foods we just don't necessarily realize, such as lettuce, celery, cucumber, red and green tomatoes. So they're in fruits and vegetables. In contrast, butters, oils, dried meats, and chocolates, cookies, cakes, they have relatively low water, which is about less than 20%. Okay. In regards to the 3 sources I talked about, 3 sources of water intake, you get you're bringing them in through liquids and foods. Okay. And also metabolic processes. Okay. So some of the water hydration terminology: euhydration is normal daily water variation. Hyperhydration is new state of condition of increased water content. Hypohydration is decreased decreased water content, and then rehydration is gaining water from hypohydrated state toward euhydration. Okay, let's see here. Water output. Body loses water in 4 ways: urine, skin, water vapor in the air, and feces. One of the things we have to realize about water output is that in regards to certain diets, high protein diet, basically you're losing water because protein breakdown forms urea, which then for urea to be excreted, it basically for every gram of, let's say, protein, you have kidneys require about 15 milliliters of water to get that urea out of there. So that's one thing to think about. Also, in regards to heat, water output is trying to basically be released through the skin when it's hot outside. Water vapor, so you have sweat through skin and water vapor through coming off the skin. Those are ways that regulation of heat takes place through water output. Balance in the body, this shows that, which is that really daily input and output are balanced here in temperate weather. If you have hot weather, your daily water output goes up, so then you have to increase your water input, obviously because of that. Daily water requirement during exercise, you have 3 factors determine water loss through sweating: severity of physical activity, environmental temperature, and humidity. Okay, major physiological defense against overheating comes from evaporation of sweat, skin surface. However, if it's humid, what happens? You don't have that evaporation of sweat, skin surface, because it's very difficult for water to go from the skin into the environment if the environment has a high amount of water in it, right, in the air. So that's one of the reasons why it's more difficult in a humid environment to get rid of that water to lower that body temperature. Fluid replacement in exercise. Fluids must be consumed regularly through physical activity, avoid dehydration, life-threatening consequences. 3, pre-exercise hyperhydration. Basically, this is drinking 400 to 600 milliliters of cold water 10 to 20 minutes before exercise, which is about 2 to 3 cups. Okay, you're talking about 8 ounces. It ends up being 13 to 20 ounces pre-hydration, or 2 to 3 cups for exercise. Blunts the rise in body temperature compared to exercising without proper fluids. And hyponatremia, water intoxication related dilution of the body's normal sodium concentration. Basically, this is whenever you have too much water and not so too much water, too much sodium free fluid. Prolonged exercise in hot weather. Poorly conditioned individuals. If you have a low salt or salt-free diet, you can have hypernatremia take place. And then poorly conditioned individuals who have a lot of sweat, basically the sweat loss with high sodium concentration, have hypernatremia problems as well. So frequent intake of large quantities of sodium-free fluid during prolonged exercise. That's why some of these drinks, such as that have a little bit of sodium in them, a small amount, it's in Gatorade, that it basically has a small sodium content. So if you lose it through sweat, you still are maintaining a small sodium concentration. That's it for the chapter. Read through chapter 2. Try to look at maybe the summary questions on page 74.